Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we start our season player review series. We're going to talk about the bottom of the Wolves roster, but a pair of intriguing rookies in Wendell Moore Jr. and Josh Minott. We'll start the show with them today. Could one or both of them find themselves in the Timberwolves rotation next year? It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit, ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. And a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find this show. You can also listen, or actually you can also watch, along with all the other Minnesota Locked On podcasts, on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. More great local sports coverage 24/7, and it's free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Of course, you can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at my account, which is at Beecken, and that's with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. All right, today begins our player review series. This will take up basically the next 2 weeks, unless, of course, there's any sort of significant breaking news in the meantime. But if you're relatively new to the podcast, we do this after each season. So what I'll do is I'll actually sort the roster by minutes played, just total minutes played. We'll start at the bottom. We'll work our way up. As we get towards the top of the roster, we'll do entire shows on the majority of rotation players. Like, for instance, today, we're going to hit the guys that played the least for the Wolves, and then we'll start to get into, midseason acquisitions like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Mike Conley and fringe rotation guys and guys who've been hurt. And we'll still, do a half to full show on each of those guys. And then we get into, the starting lineup, and we'll spend longer chunks of time, really entire shows on each of them. And we'll basically talk about the season in review for each player. And then also talk about expectations for next year on kind of a high level, what this player could bring to the team or did bring to the team this year. I think kind of both of those. Like, for some guys, we maybe didn't see them a ton. Like today, we're going to talk Josh Minott here in just a second. He only played in 15 games, played under 100 minutes this year for the Wolves. But what could he bring to the team next year? For other guys, we know exactly what they bring, like, say, Austin Rivers, who we'll talk about at some point probably next week. Like, will he be back? What would he bring to the team? What did he bring to the team this season in the 52 games that he appeared in? Would it make sense to have him back? So we'll answer those questions along the way. We'll talk about contract status as it's relevant, potential for trade, like all that stuff. There's not necessarily like 5 questions we're answering for each player. It just kind of depends on who it is. So without further ado, let's start at the bottom of the roster. We're going to skip AJ Lawson because he appeared in exactly one game and played 2 minutes for the Wolves. And that was very early in the season before he moved on. So we'll start with Josh Minott. This year's second-round draft pick. He only played in 15 games, and he only played 96 minutes. However, of the 3 players we're going to talk about today, I think he's the most likely to earn a consistent rotation role next season. And I actually think it's completely on the table that he's in the Wolves rotation next year. So who's Josh Minott? Real quickly, he last year was a second-round pick. He didn't play all that much in college, or I should say he didn't start that much in college, right? He went to Memphis. He played in 33 games, only started 5, but he has the talent, athleticism, size of somebody who's more likely to be a lottery type pick. Obviously, he was a second rounder because he didn't play a ton in college. I mean, he played a total of 483 minutes at the collegiate level and only averaged 6.5 points per game. Only shot 14% from 3-point range, right? Total, he was 2 of 14 from deep as a collegiate athlete. So the numbers at first glance don't tell you much, but Josh Minott is 6'8". He has a 6'11" wingspan. He has off the charts athleticism, and all the other stuff he did in college projects very, very, very well at the NBA level. The steal and block rates off the charts in college. He plays passing lanes extremely well. He has really good instincts, especially for a guy that only started 5 games as a freshman in college. The rebound rates are all very impressive. And again, the athleticism is probably the biggest thing. So in college, in 33 games, his assist rate was 13% for somebody who played primarily off the ball. That's really good. He had a steal rate of over 3%. He had a 5.4% block rate in college. That's crazy. I'll do it real quick here and pull up some of the league's best block rates at the NBA level this year. We should only take 2 seconds because I think that will provide some good perspective. I know a lot of times people just look at blocks per game. That's not the best way to measure this. So this year in the NBA, if we filter out, so basically for anybody that'd be eligible for the scoring title that played a legitimate amount of games, what did I say his block rate was in college? 5.4. Okay. That would actually rank 9th in the NBA this season for block rate. The only guys with better block rates than 5.4% in the NBA this year. Now we're talking about Minott's block rate at Memphis, last year. Jaren Jackson, obviously, Walker Kessler, Nick Claxton, Brook Lopez, Miles Turner, Mitchell Robinson, Drew Eubanks, and Bol Bol. Those are the only guys that have a better block rate this season in the NBA than Josh Minott had in college. Those guys are all centers. That's crazy. Just to put that in a little bit of perspective, I also mentioned the steal rate. Josh Minott in college had a 3.1% steal rate. That would actually be the best steal rate in the entire NBA this season. And caveats apply, 33 games, bench player, very limited minutes. But the point is still there. It's still 33 games. It's not a 5-game sample size. Over the course of a college season, Josh Minott had a better steal rate than anybody in the entire NBA this season and a block rate that would have ranked 9th. That projects out to a really strong NBA player, a strong off-ball presence, potentially a strong on-ball presence. And again, 6'8" with 6'11" wings. That is a significantly sized human with fantastic athleticism. I haven't even talked about rebound rate yet. And I should have just done the entire show about Josh Minott. There's so much to say about how much I like him as a prospect. In college, he had a rebound rate of 14.4%, a defensive rebound rate of 15.7%. If you missed Tuesday's show, go back and listen to it. I talked a lot about the Wolves' rebounding issues. Even that rebound rate would put him in the top 35 in the NBA this season for a total rebound rate. Josh Minott's collegiate rebound rate. Offensive rebound rate, 12.9%. That's where he did a ton of his damage on the glass in college. 12.9% this year would again be 9th in the entire league in terms of offensive rebound rate had it been in the NBA. So Minott's activity, his athleticism, his nose for the ball, which is a real thing, the instincts to jump passing lanes, to track down 50-50 balls, to be active on the glass, to dive on the floor, to use his size and athleticism to his advantage. The Wolves have some guys that haven't exactly done that. Right? The Wolves have plenty of guys like Anthony Edwards finally is starting to on the glass. He always kind of has defensively, at least off the ball. He's getting much better. Or he always has on the ball, and off the ball, it's been a little spottier for Anthony Edwards. But the way that Josh Minott's numbers played out in college in 33 games at Memphis, that's a pretty good indicator of what he could do at the NBA level. Could do. Now, like for some context, Jaden McDaniels. Now we're talking almost 4 years ago at Washington. Jaden McDaniels had a block rate of 4.9%. Still crazy. But Josh Minott's was 5.4%. McDaniels' steal rate in college was only 1.4%. Josh Minott's, again, what was it? 3.1%. Rebound rate, Josh Minott, 13% on offense, 16% defense, 14% total. Jaden McDaniels was only a 4% offensive rebound rate in college, 16% defensive rebounding, and 10.6% total rebounding. So Josh Minott had a better steal rate, block rate, rebound rate than Jaden McDaniels. Yeah, Memphis, the competition level wasn't quite to what it was in the Pac-12 for Jaden McDaniels. But actually Minott played in more games, I guess less minutes because he came off the bench. So, I'm splitting hairs there. They each played one season in college at a, D1 program. So that matters, right? I'm not at all saying Josh Minott could be Jaden McDaniels this year, next year. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the potential is there. The tools are there. Some of the stuff you can't teach as well. Like you can teach rebounding and obviously, playing passing lanes, etc. But the instincts are there for Josh Minott. And in some ways, the instincts plus activity, that combination, which is so powerful, is there at a level that wasn't there for Jaden McDaniels initially. There's a reason why a guy who didn't even start in college was a second-round pick for the Wolves. So I think I could build a case for him taking on a Taurean Prince-like role next year. He's not the shooter that Taurean Prince was. Like, for instance, in the G League this year, Josh Minott in 9 regular season games, he shot 29% from 3. All the rate-based stats are good. Like, again, he rebounded, he got steals. Like, here, let me grab those real quick. 13% rebound rate. Actually, the steal rate was pretty low for him in the well, actually, I'm looking at the Showcase Cup now. The G League is so confusing with their stats. Steal rate was 2.2% for the season for Josh Minott, a 4.7% block rate. So he did lead the Iowa Wolves in block rate. In the Showcase Cup, which was the tournament they played at the start of the season that culminated with that 30-team tournament in December, Minott only had a 0.6% steal rate, but his block rate was 4.3%. For the season, again, only 29% from 3. Over the course of 11 games in the Showcase Cup, Minott was 41% from 3. And the volume there was, I'm going to pull the exact volume, 7 of 24. So, nope, that's the regular season. Again, these G League stats. 14 of 34, 41%. So it's not tiny volume. So for the season, he's a little over 32, 33%. Not great, but an improvement over his lack of the lack of shots that he took in college last year. At the NBA level, in extremely limited minutes, under 100 minutes, Minott had an over 5% block rate, a 2% steal rate, a 14.5% rebound rate, and he shot 33% for 3. So painfully small sample at the NBA level, but there is NBA talent in Josh Minott, and I think he cracks the rotation next year. Maybe not on opening night, but at some point next year, he's going to play that like wing version of Brandon Clark, right? Like more of a 3-4 than a 4-5. Like there's a lot of similarities to how Minott plays and how, say, Brandon Clark of Memphis plays. I think he plays more 3 for Chris Finch than 4, but he has the ability to play the 3 and the 4 at the NBA level. Josh Minott, to me, is the most intriguing player that wasn't in the rotation this year that should be next year. And I think he's not a Taurean Prince player, but he may take those minutes, the combo 3-4 minutes if they move on from Prince. I think he's a better defender already. He's certainly a better rebounder already. The offense isn't there. I mean, we talk about the Wolves needing floor spacing. Yeah, I mean, Prince spaces the floor much better than Minott, but maybe they could pick that up somewhere else. Maybe the backup point guard can shoot threes. Maybe the Jalen Noel role shoots better than 29% this year. Suffice it to say, Josh Minott, I think, ends up in the rotation next season, and I'm really excited about his potential as an NBA player. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Wendell Moore Jr. next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at BetterHelp. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's really easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. It's really easy to let that happen. When we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched thin and burned out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind, especially we're only, 3 years removed from the start of the season of COVID-19 in all of our lives. And that was a time when I think many of us realized, including myself, that it helps to talk to somebody. Therapy can help. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Thanks once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. A reminder, every dayers, tomorrow we'll keep going on the roster on Thursday's show. We'll keep creeping our way up towards rotation players, so we'll knock out another 2 or 3 players on Thursday as well as we start this season review series. All right, let's continue on up the roster by talking about the other rookie at the Wolves fielded this year besides Josh Minott. That's Wendell Moore Jr., and of course, Wendell Moore was a first-round pick. He was ultimately 26th overall. The Wolves acquired him on draft night. He played a little bit more than Minott in terms of games played. He played in 29 games this season for the Wolves. And the G League run was a little bit bigger than Josh Minott. So I'll pull those stats here in a minute. And I'll do the same thing I did with Minott since he's a rookie. The profile for him coming out of college was the way I described him back when the Wolves acquired him on draft night was as a two-way role player, if that makes sense. And that he's very unlikely to be a star at the NBA level, and he may eventually be a starter. But if nothing else, he has the ability to be solid on both ends of the floor. He's not a Jimmy Butler two-way role player, to be very clear, but he has the ability to be a solid almost I think he has the ability to be better than the prototypical, the term we used to use a lot more a few years ago, a 3-and-D type player. I think he's more than that. Or can be more than that. He's 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan, so really good size. And in college, he wasn't just like a run-of-the-mill 3-and-D guy either. He was a really good defensive player, especially in the pick and roll. And that was an issue the Wolves had mightily a couple seasons ago, and really this year at times too, was point of attack defense. And now that they've swapped out D'Angelo Russell for Mike Conley, that's improved. Anthony Edwards is good in that role. I think Taurean Prince struggled there. We talked about that. Jordan McLaughlin's been kind of hit or miss. But in terms of guys, and obviously McDaniels is incredible at defending the pick and roll, but in terms of defending pick and roll, Wendell Moore Jr. can add that edge. There's some similarities to him defensively to Josh Okogie, who has now cracked the Phoenix Suns rotation after, falling in and out of the rotation the last couple years for Minnesota. But he's bigger than Okogie, and he can shoot. And Josh Okogie, as great as he is defensively, still struggles from a shooting perspective. There's some similarities to Josh Richardson. That's one of the comps that I had for him when Wendell Moore was drafted. I like that comp. In college, Wendell Moore was, let's see, was he 41%? Yeah, his last year at Duke. So he played 3 seasons. His last year at Duke, he shot 41.3% on threes, and he was 52% on catch and shoot 3-pointers in his junior year, his final season at Duke. So he could shoot the basketball. Now, before that, he was only 30%, the year before. But his last year at Duke, he played more than twice as many minutes as he did the season before that. So the volume was there in his last season at Duke, and he shot the ball much better. 41% overall from 3, 51% or 52% in catch and shoot 3-point situations for Wendell Moore at Duke. This season for the Wolves, in extremely limited minutes, what did he play? 153 minutes at the NBA level. He was only 2 for 17 on threes. That's 11.8%. There was nothing else really to write home about in terms of he actually initiated some offense because he was pressed into that duty. He had a 15% assist rate, but he had a 15% turnover rate. The steal rate was solid for him as well. He showed some good defensive chops at the NBA level. There were a couple games. He actually started 2 games back in, I think it was November. He showed the ability to be able to kind of plug and play on defense at some level, which was nice to see. But he doesn't have that like one NBA skill. So like with Josh Minott, you could throw him out there. He's going to give you size, athleticism, rebounding, block shots. Like he's just going to be bouncy. He's going to be a pogo stick. He's going to be everywhere. That's an NBA. That's a skill. Like collectively, I named like 4 things, but it's a skill. That activity level, steal rate, block rate, loose balls, etc. Size, athleticism. That's a skill set you could plug and play Josh Minott now. And there's going to be, he's not going to help you offensively. There's going to be some issues defensively, probably coverage wise, but you could do that. Wendell Moore is just more of a solid player. Like there's not the ceiling for Minott is probably higher, but the floor is lower because as of now, you could plug and play him as an energy guy, but does it turn into more than that? Wendell Moore, I don't know that he gives you as much plug and play now as Minott does because he's just solid at everything. He just is still a little bit too raw. But he has a floor, I think, of a solid bench guy. I truly believe that about Wendell Moore. I just don't know that he's there yet. He only played in 8 regular season G League games. He averaged 19 points per game on 42% shooting. He was only 29.8, so 30% from outside the arc. In the Showcase Cup, he played 5 games in the Cup. He shot 47% from 3 there. And of course, there's no way, neither on Basketball Reference or on G League, the G League website, to combine their shooting. There probably is a site somewhere that does it, but to combine their stats from the Cup, the Showcase Cup, and the regular season. So I don't know, ballparking it, he probably was like 35% maybe total between the two, 5 games in the Showcase Cup and 8 games in the regular season. The rate-based stats for him, for Wendell Moore in the G League were actually pretty good. Again, 20% assist rate in the Showcase Cup. The turnover rate was a little bit high, and he initiated some offense at the G League level as well. But in the 8 regular season games, 25% assist rate, only a 14.6% turnover rate. Rebounds the ball fairly well for a guard, for somebody who, again, initiates some offense. I don't know right now how clear his role would be on the 2023-24 Timberwolves. He's got a shot at cracking the rotation. Maybe he's ahead of, he plays a different position than Josh Minott. He's more of a 2 that can run offense, whereas Minott's a 3-4 hybrid. But we talk about the Jalen Noel role. We talk about Taurean Prince potentially moving on, Jordan McLaughlin potentially moving on. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a restricted free agent. So those are 4 guys we talked about on Tuesday's show. We don't know their status next year if they're going to be on the roster. That's 4 potential rotation roles. And Wendell Moore fits somewhere between those roles, right? Like he could do a little bit of all those things. He adds that edge on defense, the potential as a shooter, the potential. There's more of a versatile offensive skill set for Moore than there is for, say, Minott. So all that to say, I think Minott's more likely to be in the rotation eventually next year. Moore might be more likely to be there at the start of the season and kind of almost be in an Austin Rivers type role. Like he's another guy. Rivers wasn't in the rotation he played 52 games. So he was in and out of the rotation, but was kind of like the 11th, 10th guy on the roster. That might be the Moore role next year. And obviously he's not the vet that Rivers is, but that type of role where you're a 2 that can lead some offense, that can play tough defense, that can come in and do a few things well, shoot the ball decently from outside the arc. That might be the Moore role next season if they let Rivers move on. That's the type of position I see him in next year. But long-term, the skill set, I think, projects out as a solid rotation player, potentially a role player starter type guy down the road. Maybe it's in a couple seasons when Conley moves on. Obviously he plays the same position essentially as Anthony Edwards, so maybe it's not in the starting lineup for the Wolves, but I think that rotation role is probably there for him in Minnesota or elsewhere in the next couple of years, and I still like him quite a bit as a prospect. All right, let's close the show by talking about Matt Ryan, a midseason 2-way signing for the Wolves. We'll do that here next. All right, Matt Ryan was on the Los Angeles Lakers. He wasn't even a 2-way player. He was on a regular deal with the Lakers early this season. They cut him. They waived him on December 1st. He signed a 2-way contract with the Wolves less than a week later. And I mean, for the Lakers, he was a kind of a fringe rotation guy. He played really well, obviously, in training camp and preseason for them. But in the regular season, he was 37% from 3 for the Lakers in 11 minutes per game over 12 games. He came to Minnesota. The Wolves gave him there were a couple of moments throughout the season where the Wolves said, all right, we need some shooting. Let's put Matt Ryan in our rotation. And let's see, when was it? Okay, so they signed him on the 7th. He played, in December, there was a stretch where he played in 4 or 5 games and played at least 14 minutes in each of those, or excuse me, at least 11 minutes in each of those games. And during that 4-game stretch, Ryan was 29% from 3. So that was kind of his first audition where Chris Finch said, all right, Matt Ryan, we need some shooting. Let's give you this chance. In fact, one of those games was the win over Denver, January 2nd. And he combined to shoot under 30% over those games. There was one other stretch in early February when the Wolves had some injuries that they said, all right, Matt Ryan, you're going to play in 4 straight games. 3 of these games, you're going to play at least 13 minutes. And he shot 41% from 3 over those games. And actually added an element of floor spacing that the Wolves needed badly. They beat Denver by 30 in that game when Denver brought nobody to Minnesota. They beat Utah by 25 during that stretch. They were also blown out by Denver during that stretch of games, but he shot 41%. So those were the 2 chances he got in the rotation. One went well, one didn't. For the season, he was 38.8% for the Wolves. So overall, 38.1%, which is a really good mark. It's not quite to sharpshooter level. And if that's the only skill you're bringing to the table, you're not going to get a consistent NBA rotation job. And Matt Ryan's a good story. I mean, I'm sure many of you are familiar, could look it up, the story of him, trying to get back into or get into the league after being undrafted and bouncing around. He actually played at 3 different schools in college, bounced around the G League, played for Boston at the end of the season last year, was on a two-way deal. I think he played like, one game. So yeah, there's a lot to like about the story, but he doesn't bring anything to the table besides shooting. And if that's the deal, you got to shoot like 44% from three. If the only thing you could do is shoot. And even in the G League, like last season, he was 41%, which is really good, 35% this year. So total in 37 G League games, he's 40.1%. That's really good. Everybody could use a 40% three-point shooter in their rotation. However, if he doesn't do anything else, it's not superstar sharpshooter level shooting. Low assist rate, very low rebound rate, like in the G League, 5% rebound rate. At the NBA level, again, in limited minutes, 35 games total over the last two seasons, 315 minutes, a rebound rate of 4.5%. Like, he doesn't rebound. He doesn't have like, all he is a catch and shoot guy. If that number is 44%, I'm making a case for him on the roster next year, a fringe rotation guy. I can't do that. He shot 38%. And I know it's a small sample, but the body work we have is a small sample. That's where we're at. And if that's your one skill, you have to be able to prove it when you get your shot. And he's not quite there. Somebody's going to give him a chance next year. I don't think it's the Wolves. I also don't think he can be on a two-way contract again, because he was on one last year and this year. Last year with Boston, this year with Minnesota. Unless you can't do 2 years in a row with the same team. I think you might be able to go to a different team and do it. So I think actually he could be on a two-way in Minnesota or elsewhere. I think you just can't do more than 2 straight years with the same team on a two-way. I'm pretty sure I have that right. But again, the rebound rate, low. Assist rate, low. Obviously isn't a great defender, doesn't block shots, shoots 2/3 of his shot attempts on offense from outside the arc, doesn't get to the line, makes his free throws when he gets there. But there just isn't and by the way, in the G League this year, he was a volume scorer, 19 points a game, but only 35% from the floor, 35% from three, got to the line less than twice a game, average less than 4 rebounds per game in decent minutes. I'm sorry, that was not, yeah, that's true. Average less than 4 rebounds per game. Yeah, all that's true. Thought I was looking at the wrong thing, but I wasn't. Average less than 4 rebounds per game in 36 rebounds or 36 minutes per game. So all that to say, Matt Ryan has one replicatable NBA level skill, and it's very good. He's a very, very good 3-point shooter. I'd even put 2 very. So very, very good 3-point shooter, but he does nothing else. So I think it's unlikely he's back with the Wolves. I do think he'll be in training camp with an NBA team. If he can show, like, if say he goes nuts and shoots 45% in preseason or something and it looks great in training camp, perhaps he makes an NBA roster next year. But there's a lot of guys out there that shoot 38, 39, 40% from three, that do other things. And that's the problem with Matt Ryan. And he's not young either. He's going to be 25 next, or he was 25 this year. So he just turned 26 actually a couple weeks ago. So I think it's unlikely Matt Ryan's back. Seemed to be the Wolves seem to enjoy having him on the team. I wouldn't be upset if they ended up using a two-way on him again, because you can never have enough shooting. But you'd love to see him be able to do something else. He's 6'7" too. He's not small. So there should be some ability to grab some rebounds and stuff in there, but there just hasn't been for Matt Ryan. All right. That's all we have for you today. Tomorrow, we will keep going up the roster, and we'll talk Luka Garza, the other two-way player for the Wolves. We'll skip over Bryn Forbes because of his, he was waived midseason and is very unlikely to play in the league again, legal troubles, etc. We'll talk Nate Knight, and we'll talk Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which is a bit of more of an extended conversation. So perhaps we'll start the show with Nickeil on Thursday. So make sure to follow and subscribe to the show wherever you listen and watch podcasts. A big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Once again, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.